we're especially excited to welcome the director of tonight's film here this evening. So I can invite Johanna up on stage just to say a few words about the film.
Thank you. Oh my God, there's a balcony. There's a balcony there, guys. I was just on my way up here on the train, and it was getting really, really dark, and it was getting really, really cold, and it's like the first little chill of winter. I'm really starting to feel it today. And I was just thinking back to that first day that I landed in Mali, going back like 2.5 years, when I was someone who was literally affected by the story. I read about music being banned in a place which is the birthplace of music. It's the birthplace of the blues. And it was a story that affected me so deeply that I literally got on an airplane and went. And we had no planning, we had no backing, we really had nothing. I just went because I thought that this was a story that somebody needed to tell. So I'm not going to give too much away. I want you to see the film, I want you to absorb the film, and I'm going to be sticking around. And afterwards, please ask me lots and lots of questions, because there's a lot happening on screen in the next 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Great, so we'll see you in a little while. Thanks. That's ever so much for you. I think we can agree. You managed to make an uplifting film about a heartbreaking series of events. When you found out about what was going on in Mali, you just went. Yeah. How long until you knew where to take the film or what you could achieve with it?
Yeah, I don't know. It was a good couple of months, maybe 6 months, 8 months. The very, very first day that we arrived in Mali, the one thing I did have prepared was a local fixer. And that's like a local producer who's on the ground, who knows the scene, who kind of drives you around and, can make phone calls for you, etc., etc. And on the very, very first morning that I was there, this guy who I had just met, who's recommended by someone, one of these things, he said, I'm going to take you to the house of my mom's best friend, she's a singer. I said, okay, so I'm here to talk to musicians, all right, let's go talk to her, who is she? He said, she's Hiba Arbi. And I had heard of Hiba Arbi. Hiba Arbi is so famous in Mali and indeed around the world. And it was like that first morning when he took me to Hiba Arbi's house and we interviewed her and she sang for us that very first morning. I had this kind of inkling that, do you know what, actually I think this is going to work out. I think we're going to be able to make a film here. This is like a really good start. But then from there, we actually interviewed all kinds of people that didn't end up making it into the final film. So I think it was on the very next trip that we met Disco. The trip after that, we met Moussa, and then the trip after that, we met Songhay Blues. Once Songhay Blues came into the picture, I knew exactly what this film was going to be. Until that point, there were a lot of questions. But there was just something about them. In a way, when you met them, you sort of knew what was going to happen. I mean, we didn't know they were going to become international superstars like they have, but the energy that they had was so sort of, it was just like palpable. I knew that their story, something good was going to happen, something great was going to happen, and I knew that their story could kind of be a little bit of a narrative. I had absolutely no idea that Hiba planned to throw a concert in Timbuktu and bring music back to Timbuktu after the music ban. This was a complete surprise to me. She told me in April 2014, and it took her until December 2014 to actually pull it off. And again, with that, we had about 3 or 4 endings on the go, but we thought this could be an ending, this could be an ending, let's see what happens. But until we were actually there in Timbuktu, filming, and she was singing, and everybody was around, it was really only at that point when I thought, okay, we're done filming now. This is the final scene of the film.
And it's an incredible final scene, though we can see from the updates at the end, it's very much, it's not, everything's not back to normal, everything's not happy. Have you been keeping in contact with?
Yeah, I saw Hiba in Copenhagen last week. she's so jet set now. It's amazing. So yeah, I mean, we're in touch with them every, as much as we can. Soul Mode Blues I'm in touch with every day on Facebook because they're like Facebook fiends now. Hyra I keep in touch with, every few weeks, every month, whenever we need to be in touch with her. Disco and Musa less so, but because the film is coming out at the moment, we're in touch with all of them because we need to, get their permission to use their music on the soundtrack. I mean, there's still so much logistical stuff that's going on, it's insane. But the situation in Mali is unsure, and people are really unsure, and I've been doing a lot of talks and interviews with Some Play Blues in the past couple of weeks, and the way that they put it is really, as per usual, they put it extremely well. They say, the jihadists aren't in control of the north anymore, but they're still there. Garba tells a story about the last time he was home. He was walking down the street, and when they go home they don't play music because they're just too terrified. But he was walking down the street and he was walking in this direction, and coming in this direction was a guy from Ansar al-Din, one of the main jihadist groups operating in the region. And they knew each other, this guy's like, guitarist, and Garba's like, terrorist. And they just kind of kept walking, like nobody did anything. So these guys are still very much there, they're in the region, they're not in control right now, so technically there isn't a music ban, but nobody really wants to do anything major. Musa is kind of tentatively traveling around doing the wedding circuit like he always has done, and that's growing a little bit, but there isn't the sort of big huge expression of music like there used to be in Mali. And in Mali that's actually very devastating because every other person is either a musician or makes their living from music. So it has completely decimated so many people's livelihoods, and the infrastructure of the industry has been completely decimated. The recording studios, the instruments themselves, the DJs, their equipment was all burned. The radio station, as you saw in Timbuktu, smashed, so they're doing everything on dictaphones now. I mean, there isn't really an industry, so even if, tomorrow all the jihadists said, okay, bye, we're leaving, it would still take a number of years for the industry to kind of find itself again. So it's just a question mark, and really with the jihadist groups, I'm going on and on, but with the jihadist groups, before when I was filming, we kind of knew what was happening because they were only attacking the north. Kidal, Gao, Timbuktu. Now, they're in the south. So for the first time you're getting attacks in Bamako, you're getting attacks way down on the border with Burkina Faso where we were filming in the refugee camps. There are attacks like that. Now, if not every week, every other week. And that's scary because it's sort of an unknown. Now there doesn't seem to be any sort of limit to where these jihadists are actually operating. Some of them have pledged their support to ISIS, although it is a completely different thing, but some of them are saying, yay, ISIS. It's entered a new chapter, and people don't know how this chapter is going to end. So it's all like this at the moment.
I think despite that, there's an overwhelming sense throughout the film of a desire to go home, a very clear sense of what is home and where is home. So while it's very specifically a film about Mali, at the same time, it's one of the best films I've seen about refugees, and it's incredibly timely. What's it been like promoting the film, given the current refugee crisis?
The refugee thing is extraordinary because it's not what I thought about when I went there. I wanted to make a film about the ban of music in Mali, and through that story talk a little bit about the rise of extremism in North and West Africa, which is something that I have been following for quite some time. The idea of refugees didn't really enter into my thought process at the very beginning, but it became very clear, especially as we were finishing the film, in light of what's happening. Every single person in this film is a refugee, and they spend the entire film trying to go home, which is exactly the opposite, narrative, that we're being fed at the moment through media and various things. We're saying, all the refugees are fleeing, all the refugees are fleeing. Well, of course they're fleeing, because there's a war going on in their country. And I actually think that this film now has, in a way, like another layer of impact that it can have on people who come to see it, and especially in France and especially in America. I want to try to shift that narrative about refugees. Because if you can fall in love with Some Play Blues and Hyra and Disco and Musa and understand that they're refugees for a reason, and understand that all they want to do is go home, like we all would if we were in that situation, then I think that you can begin to understand all refugee crises around the world. in a different way, in a correct way, in my opinion.
There on my right.
Wondered if you could just tell me if it was difficult filming, taking film equipment into a place like that. Are films as opposed, as a medium?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's it was absolutely dangerous. There's no question about that. But it's it's peculiar when you're here and you're in your armchair and you're watching the news reports in Mali and you're everyone's shooting each other up and you're like, that's the most terrifying thing. I can't even imagine walking into that. When you actually land in Mali and you see that quite a few people are, going about their lives trying to, eke out an existence during the conflict zone, and you stick with them, you realize that you can actually maneuver in a situation like that, and it's not as scary as it seems from here. Having said that, yeah, of course it was dangerous. Was it as dangerous for us as it was for the musicians that we were filming? No. I mean, they were living with it. I could get on a plane and go home, and they couldn't. So, again, that gives you another layer of perspective. I was actually pregnant for the first 8 months that I was out there filming. So that was something else entirely as well. But, again, as I said earlier, we tried to stay in the south as much as we could. And then we ventured north only when absolutely necessary. And when we did venture north, we made sure that we were well protected and that we had things in place. Like when we went to Timbuktu for Hyro's final concert, that was actually the only time that we were protected by the UN mission in Mali, MINUSMA, and they flew us up on their airplane, and they gave us a pretty badass security guard that didn't leave our side for the 38 hours that we were actually in Timbuktu. But you pick up over the years. I've worked for a long, long time in Africa, and I've been working for a long time for BBC World. So you kind of pick up what you do and don't do in situations like that. You don't ever go and film in the same place twice. You don't stay in the same hotel twice. You don't linger in a city if it has recently been occupied, and you listen very, very closely to your people on the ground. We were listening to the UN, and we were listening to the Foreign Office and all these people, but actually we were also listening to our informal network. And very often we would get off the plane planning a shoot in Gao, and we would meet up with our guys, and they'd say, don't go to Gao, there's rumors, there's a guy on the road, my friend saw this guy, and then they're like, go to Timbuktu instead. Timbuktu at this point is safer than New York. And they really did know what the hell was going on. So you just have to listen to your people and just feel your way through it and not take unnecessary risks. Now, having said that, you're probably wondering about the footage of the battle for Gao when the camera's here and the guy shooting is like right there. That was shot by a cameraman who was embedded with the army unit who is military trained. Because I'm also a firm believer in the right person for the right job. So if you're going to go out with a military unit, I really require that person to be military trained. So yeah, it was scary, but not as scary as it was for the characters in the film. Not even close.
So do you think there's a possible kind of happy ending in this northern region of Mali? Because after all, so if I understand properly the conflict, there was an originary conflict between the Tuaregs and all these people from the north of Mali that are ethnically quite different from the people from the south. Mm-hmm. Then it's kind of like the Islamists or the jihadists took profit of the situation to go into a region that was strategically interesting for them.
That's exactly right.
So, well, I knew about the conflict before.
Okay. There's so much bitterness and there's so much resentment. And Ali referred to that a little bit in that wonderful interview he did where he quotes Abraham Lincoln. There are these years and years and generations of hurt and bitterness and anger, because this isn't the first time that there was an uprising in the north by a particular group of Tuaregs. And I should probably point out that not all Tuaregs are for independence, but it's just this particular group. There was an uprising in the 90s, and then going back before that. And this thing has been going on for quite some time, and it's never properly been addressed. And until it is properly addressed, I think the country is very vulnerable. So this peace agreement was signed in over the summer, but 5 weeks later there was fighting and skirmishes and whatnot. And there's so many different groups. Even Jimmy at the end leaves the MNLA and starts his own movement, and we're like, what? You know, it was a complete surprise. So it's chaos really, but until they sort each other out, I think the country's going to be vulnerable for people coming in from the side. And as you say, it is a really strategic region. The Sahara, for those of you who don't know, I mean, the smuggling routes through the Sahara that go through Mali, have been fought over for years. Everybody wants these smuggling routes. So it's, we wait with bated breath to see what's going to happen in Mali. And people have very different opinions. Some people are optimists, of course, and some people are pessimists, of course. And we just follow the story very closely and try to help the musicians when we can.
The back.
I'm sure, like many, there was lots of people here at Songhai Blues last week down the road, who are also the new kind of kids on the scene in terms of music, world music engaged in the mainstream. I'd be interested to see who here was in Leeds 10 years ago to see Tartite with Zoom with Disco.
Yeah.
Wardrobe. I'm sure it pops up many people actually, but great.
Yeah, let's
find
out.
Not a connection actually until you kind of mentioned it today in the film. And the thing to that is another band that's kind of hit the mainstream from the region. I wonder what you knew at the moment about how Tinariwen were engaging with the conflict and how that's affected them making their music.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so who was at the Songhai Blues gig last week? Or when they played last summer? Someone here? One, two, few more. And 10 years ago, Tartite played, Disco's band. One there. I didn't know Tartite played here 10 years ago. That's amazing. It's very difficult to tour Tartite because there's like 100 of them. And I saw Hyra really struggling with Disco when she was trying to get Disco to go up to her concert. And Disco's like, well, yeah, half the group is in a refugee camp in Mauritania and the other half are in a refugee camp in Burkina Faso, and we have to play with all of them. And Hyra's like, what? It's hard to tour Tartite, but they are amazing. Very, very, very traditional, very beautiful, very rhythmic, very, really just, they send you into a trance, honestly. They're amazing. And so the question was, Tinariwen. Tinariwen, for those of you who aren't aware, they were like the first super cool kind of desert blues, rock stars to come out of the Sahara and really make it big around the world. And the co-writer of this film, Andy Morgan, who I worked with very closely, discovered Tinariwen and was their manager throughout their whole rise to fame. He's actually written an amazing book where he talks a lot about Tinariwen called Music, Culture and Conflict in Mali. And it's print on demand, so I don't know if you can waltz into your local independent bookstore and buy it, but I think you can get it online because it's all sold out, so now it's just print on demand. But I really, really recommend that people read that. I read it a few months into the making of this film, and it transformed my thinking. He writes a lot about Tinariwen. He knows Tinariwen really well. In a way, I don't really want to speak on their behalf and talk about how they reacted to the conflict, but they have been involved in the Tuareg uprisings for many, many, many years, since the early 90s, and were instrumental in the early 90s. And the music that they sing comes directly out of their experiences with the Tuareg uprisings. So if you haven't heard of Tinariwen, do check them out. They're incredible. They tour constantly. And in this film, we have 2 Tinariwen songs that have never been released before. One sung by Musa at the very end of the film, and the other one sung by Abdallah from Tinariwen, right at the beginning when we're first meeting Musa. At the beginning of the film. So those, for Tinariwen fans, that's kind of a coup that we got 2 unreleased Tinariwen tracks for this film, and they'll be on the soundtrack, which will be available in March on Transgressive.
Could you tell us a bit about the Music in Exile Fund?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, pretty much, the moment I started making this film out there, the thing that people were writing to me to say, oh, I hear you're making this film, I hear you're making this film, how can we help the musicians in Mali? And I basically said there's 2 things. Number 1, buy their albums. Don't listen to them on Spotify. Don't listen to them on YouTube. Purchase them. So Songhai Blues have an album out. Tinariwen have an album out. Hyra Arby's got an album out. Tartite actually has 3 or 4 albums that were recorded live in the Sahara that you can get on iTunes. It's imperative that we support these musicians by buying their music because they're not able to make a living at home. Really at all. And the second thing we did is that we hooked up with a really great organization called Index on Censorship. Because I'm a filmmaker, not a fundraiser. and we really needed an expert. So Index on Censorship have been amazing, and they actually were involved from the very beginning. I think my second phone call was to Index on Censorship to tell them that I had this idea to make this film. And they have basically given us a challenge, and they said, if you can raise enough money, i.e. 10 grand, we're going to start a fellowship for musicians in exile. So the fund is called the Music in Exile Fund. And once a year, they're going to choose one musician or more, depending on how much money we raise. And they're going to give them a year-long support, helping them to find safe places to write, safe places to record, helping them to find ways to disseminate their music, bringing them over to this country to teach them all about the legal side of music. And they do this all the time with writers and artists and musicians in the past as well, but there's never been a specific fund just for musicians. So if you go on our website, theywillhavetokillusfirst.com, all the details are there. You can donate, and if you donate, and there's a text number and it's on our website, if you show me your text, I'm going to give you a really, really cool temporary tattoo tonight of the film's title, They Will Have to Kill Us First. And I've got all my coats on, otherwise I'm going to show it to you, but I can show you outside. It's just a really great legacy for the film. And we have a lot of plans for this film, but one of the legacies that we are really pleased about is that musicians who are being persecuted and tortured and told that they can't sing, can actually get some help. And there are places in the world where they can get some help, and we'd love to chuck them some money because we think that the work that they're doing is awesome.
Is there a question in the middle?
Kind of, yeah.
Helping musicians to find safe places to write and record music is the wrong thing at all, no. I mean, I wouldn't do it, I wouldn't run that thing myself, because I don't know the first thing about doing that. I know how to make films, So that's why we hooked up with people who we think are the experts and who have been doing it since the 1970s. And they have supported all manner of extraordinary people. Writers who are being persecuted and thrown in jail. They provide legal assistance to people who need their help. I mean, this is something that they do. So I think your question is probably more fundamental. Should we, I don't think I can answer your question. But thanks.
Anyone else got any more questions for Johanna? Back.
It's clear what the objective of the Tuareg are, but did you pick up what the objectives are for the jihadist groups while you were there? And secondly, can you foresee a time in the immediate future or the near future when tourists might start returning to Mali because their economy is suffering dreadfully because of the lack of tourists down to the security situation?
Yeah, I know. Every time we were there, people were literally overjoyed to see us. The hotels that we would stay in, or the restaurants that we would, eat in, or they couldn't believe that we were there. I mean, they would applaud us because the tourist industry, as you say, is just, it's non-existent. What you do have in the cities are lots and lots and lots of UN people and lots of soldiers and about 1,000 journalists, at least during the conflict. So there was a little bit there, but now that the conflict is the world's the eyes of the world's media have shifted elsewhere, you don't get the same amount of journalists. So yeah, people were really happy to see us, and you're absolutely right. I don't know when the tourist industry is going to be able to pick up again. Not yet. Not yet. I think that we could probably use the Festival in the Desert as a good guide. So the Festival in the Desert is this incredible, 2-3 day festival that happened every year in the dunes outside of Timbuktu, and it was this massive, long, music jam. Lots and lots and lots of musicians from Mali and the region. Your occasional star from the US or the UK, but for the most part, a festival with lots of local musicians, and people would flock to it. And that was cancelled after the 2002 version, and it hasn't ever come back. And I think that when the Festival in the Desert comes back, I think the place is going to be flooded with tourists again, because people miss it. These people, there's lots of people who made that pilgrimage every year to the Festival in the Desert. It was a real highlight for lots of people who were intrepid travelers. So when that comes back, I think then, it will probably be a bit safer to go. Having said that, I'm planning on going in January to the Seibu Festival sur le Niger, at the end of January, which is in the south. I feel pretty comfortable going, but I'm not the average person. I don't think you could probably get insurance to go. As a tourist, I think travel insurance would be non-existent. So, I don't know. I think we watch and we wait and we hold our breath. And as to your question about what did the jihadists want, well, I kind of agree with Songpoint Blues, to be honest. And Songpoint Blues, as they say in the film, these guys are, smugglers. They're drug traffickers, they're arms traffickers. They want control of the region. It has nothing to do with religion. And I'm in complete agreement with them.
I think I'll draw this to a close there. It's been fantastic, there's lots to think about. And thank you so much to you guys for coming, and to Johanna for coming and for making the film. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how it develops, and to keep kind of hearing back from it over the coming months, years.
And please do support these musicians. If you see that they're booked to play, go and see them play. Buy their albums. Let's do what we can to just keep them going whilst the music industry in Mali is rebuilding itself. Thank you.